You're listening to the Practical Tax Podcast with tax attorney Steve Moskowitz. The information contained in this podcast is based upon information available as of date of recording and will not be updated for any changes in law or regulation. Any information is not to be considered tax advice or legal advice and does not form an attorney-client relationship. Further, this podcast may be construed as attorney advertising. You should seek professional consultation for your individual tax and legal situation.
Welcome to yet another edition of Practical Tax with tax attorney Steve Moskowitz. Steve, you're looking well, my friend.
As you, Chip. Thanks so much.
There's a lot to talk about with taxes. I know you see tax implications in almost every human behavior, which makes sense because I think it is, right? Joining us right now is, again, this is an interesting guy. Brandon Neely is not only a financial planner, but he's got an interesting niche, and he joins us here on the Practical Tax Show. Brandon, welcome. Say hi to Steve.
Hey, Steve. Thanks.
Hey, Brandon. How you doing?
Good.
So let's start right away, if we can, with the whole concept of financial planning. And this goes out to both you guys. I know that they say start young. Are there any other advantages to starting a financial plan for small children? And maybe, Steve, you can also explain why the IRS now wants us to have Social Security numbers out of the womb. Start with you, Brandon.
The government likes keeping track of us.
Yeah.
But as far as doing that, for example, if mom and dad have a business and they employ their child under the age of 18, they don't have to pay Social Security taxes on that. It's just a little wrinkle in the law for employing your kids under age 18.
And that's what Trump's dad did that, didn't he? If I recall correctly.
They take advantage of every law, which we all should.
Right.
And the other thing is, the banks always have these posters up. If you take a kid and the day that kid is born, you have an account set up for him. And you make little deposits in there, but regular deposits. By the time that kid has graduated from college, that account can be enormous. So instead of coming out of school saying, oh, how am I going to pay all these debts for my basket weaving classes and these other things? The kid says, hey, look at me. I have a big fat bank account. I can do what I want. I'm not forced to take a job to pay my student loan and my rent if mom and dad kick me out. So the bottom line is, and I mean, I'd love to say, I just figured this out and get your pencils out. But the financial people over and over and over again have said that if you have a small amount, but regular, that's the trick. It's like exercise. It's got to be regular. There'd be a tremendous amount here. And then we can get into, well, okay, how do we invest the funds and how much is conservative and how much is aggressive? I won't even get into that part. Not to mention, Chip, I'm always preaching about the benefits of companies having pension plans. So how much more if the kid comes to work for mom and dad and they say, well, as part of being an employee here now, you're entitled to the pension plan. It's just tremendous savings. To me, that's a no-brainer.
Brandon, you've obviously been dealing with this a lot too. What's your take?
Yeah, I agree with him. It's not about rate of return. It's about volume, right? The more volume that you can put into something, the better, right? So that's the power for me, is thinking through how am I doing that volume from the early age, and not just looking at, hey, am I making this rate of return over here or here, but it's all one wallet. So how does all of this play with each other to help you go where you want to go? And that's why I think being that a strategist versus just a planner oftentimes is, how can I get as much for you in the market? Whereas a strategist, for me as a cash flow management strategist, I want to look at all the pictures. I'm a caretaker of my mother-in-law. I have a life insurance policy for her, making sure that there is long-term care needs or any of that stuff, and she's going to pass that on to me. I do this thing called infinite banking. I have some policies that I use for businesses. I think about taxes all the time whenever I'm designing these things.
My favorites.
Right?
Yeah.
Always thinking about taxes. And my hope is that I always have a tax problem because I'm growing my money and I'm growing my wealth, right? Not shrinking. But then my mother-in-law bought a policy on my son who's 4 years old. So I'm already thinking about future, his name. Well, I'm not going to tell you his name because I don't put it on there, but he has an adulting fund.
Wow. So let me ask you this, because this is as we grow and mature and we decide on the type of income that we're going to seek. A lot of people want to have their own business. It's kind of been the American dream, but obviously that dream can turn into a nightmare. You owned a coffee shop. Let me ask you, and then on Steve, part of this, both of you, what small mistakes did you make, Brandon? And what are the common ones people make, Steve, and how can they avoid them? We'll start with you, Brandon, with the coffee shop.
Man, how long do you got? When you go into any entrepreneurship or business ownership, most of the time you have to have some idealism to go into it, especially if you don't have a rich relative or anything like that to help you go ahead. I didn't have, a rich uncle that gave me a loan. I had to take on debt, right, to do that. And so that was, a challenge for me. And we were idealistic. We started a coffee shop of all things. The way in which how much money can go through your hands is insane. I will tell you, and I'm on a tax podcast, right? I swear to God, I felt like Uncle Sam made more money than me every time I did a transaction. I'm like, holy crap, I'm writing checks to this guy who doesn't even show up to work ever. It was.
He'll show up if you don't give him the check.
I know. And I was like, all right, he'll come and arrest me if I don't pay him, but he doesn't actually.
Well, it probably wouldn't be an arrest initially, but they would start seizing things.
Yeah, right.
Like your bank account and other things.
Not that they'd have much to seize at that point, but
Well, Steve, your experience, obviously you've had hundreds, if not thousands of different clients that have their own businesses. I mean, my brother-in-law was in the restaurant business and people, and they were really successful, but they worked honestly 18, 19 hours a day for 20 years.
Why did they only work part-time, Chip?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. I mean, he used to tell me that every new restaurant, they ended up having like 12 of them, but every new restaurant put all the others on the line. If that failed, the whole
absolutely.
thing.
And one of the things that I tell people that are thinking about going into business, I said, if you're married or you have a partner, you got to talk to them, because when you switch from being an employee with a quitting time to being a business owner, there is no quitting time when you're a business owner. Be prepared for that to have a major effect on your personal relationships, to the point where some of them are going to break up if they're not strong enough, because a business is like a baby. It's a child. It's living. It's screaming. It's demanding. And its needs comes first. Your baby eats first. And if there's not enough food to go around, you go hungry, but you feed the baby. And what happens a lot of times with a small business, like Brandon was saying, you take everything you have, you can borrow, you put it in the business. And you may have also borrowed money from your parents or friends or the bank, whatever. And it is a constant struggle, and you don't get time off. It's basically, in your business, a lot of times, at least initially or for a long time into it, you're talking about a 24/7 commitment. And I wasn't kidding about, before you do it, have a chat with your significant other, because your significant other might not like sitting at home by themselves while you're, closing up the restaurant and talking to some customer and some employee and ordering something. It's a major thing. Now, the reason that you stand to make so much more by being a business owner than being an employee is to make up for all the risk that you take and all the hours and everything else. It's like that old these are old basic principles, the risk reward principle. The more risk you take, the more reward you can get. But the bottom line is, I know it's everybody's dream, because everybody looks at a business and says, oh, look at the boss. He makes all the money and I do all the work. I sure wish I was the boss. And a lot of times what the employee doesn't understand is, if the boss makes $1 million a day in gross revenue and his expenses are $1 million and a penny, he's going to come up with that penny. And they don't realize that. So again, I'm a business owner, and I have been for over 30 years. And for me, that's the right thing. That's my personality, business owner. But you have to make sure that's the right personality. And, by talking to guys like Brandon and us, we can really give you some guidance along the way
If I
and
came to
avoid some of these pitfalls.
if I came to one of you two guys and I said I'm thinking of starting a restaurant, obviously I'd rather I know, but I mean, like I used to grow up dreaming of like having a hardware store because I thought, people always need that, and if they don't come for a couple weeks, the hardware's still good, as opposed to the fish and the meat that I got to throw out, right? And
Or
I
really use a lot of spices.
Yeah.
so I mean, do you guys have like a checklist if somebody
Yeah.
comes in and wants to do it? Brandon, do you?
There's three things I tell every business owner or entrepreneur, and then there's the entrepreneurs, people who want to start a business who actually don't. It is know that you know that you know that you're called to it, because it's going to suck for a couple years, right? Or maybe even when you're 20 years, you still got to do some of the cleaning the toilets, even though you don't want to, right? Because you're the leader. Then you have to have a team around you. Some are those people that just care about you, not necessarily just the business. They care about you. Good tax attorneys, tax people. Like for me, I do profit first. Those people on your team that want to help you succeed and having a team approach. So that's my second thing. And then the third thing is know your numbers. I mean, I talk to business owners all the time that say, I don't like numbers. I'm like, well, you better at least understand what a P&L statement is. So when you are going through this, you understand what's happening. I mean, I hear business owners who forget that they owe money in taxes when they made a lot of money. And I'm like,
Oh, I see that all the time, Brandon. And another thing that I see, and I just want to say how much I agree with Brandon. For example, I had a client come to me and he was a great chef. He would love to go to this guy's house for dinner. And he had the ideal spot. It was a charming little place. And he came to me for advice. And I said, no doubt about you're a great cook. And that is a charming little spot. But here's the problem. It's a little spot, assuming you had 2 dinner settings, 7 days a week, and you filled every chair. That spot is so small, you wouldn't even cover your expenses. He never considered that. There's so much you have to consider in a business.
I think about part of this that when you talk about getting moving forward, let's talk about the debt that a student gets when they go to school, and I think about this too. I mean, a friend of mine's daughter went to Boston College to major in theater and spent, I don't know, $75,000. Maybe that was just for 2 or 3 years. It was a lot of money. Now there's a lot of debt. I mean, is that obviously that kind of advice is difficult to tell somebody? Maybe your kid shouldn't be going to college, in maybe trade school or maybe something else. I mean, because everybody wants to think their kid's the next Einstein when obviously it's not true. Brandon, Steve, do you have advice for people that are
Yes,
facing
I
that
do.
dilemma?
And to me, education is like a trade school. When I went to college, I took the course in accounting because I wanted to start off as an accountant. And I was a CPA before I was a tax attorney. But to me, when I went to college taking the accounting courses, and yes, I was forced to take, a history class and some other classes that I didn't want to. But to me, college was a trade school. It was teaching me how to be an accountant, just like law school was teaching me how to be a lawyer. But what you want to avoid, some people say it as a joke, but it's a cruel joke. You want to avoid the degrees where when you graduate, you have to learn to say, do you want fries with that? Because if some kids, they love taking a course in something, and I say, well, what jobs are available for basket weavers? So, and also, again, yes, I originally, I was a poor boy, and Chip, I was a New York City taxi cab driver before I was a professional person. So I was a poor boy that didn't want to be a poor boy, and my way out of being basically the gutter was to get educated. I wanted to be a professional man. So I thought education was the way, and for me it was.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing I say is before you invest all that money in a degree, there are people like Billy Gates and Steve Jobs and a number of others. They didn't graduate from college, but they did okay. So I would say, okay, what is it you want to do? So if you say, well, I want to be an engineer. Well, what do engineers make? And you look at that and you say, what's the degree I have to do? And also don't forget that initial investment, those 4, 6, 8, how many years you're in school and getting school debt. What if you had a job? And then I make it as a business decision. So if you said to me that if you went to engineering school, your earnings over a lifetime would be so much more than if you had a lower job without get the education. I find history fascinating, but unless you want to be a history teacher with a history teacher's salary, what are you going to do with it? And, I see all kinds of kids taking degrees that might be worthwhile, studies in some area like political science. Well, all right, maybe somebody wants to be president of the United States, but barring a few really key jobs, what is that education going to buy you? So to me, forgive me, I look at all education like a trade school. And, yes, I would go to the trade school that taught me how to be a lawyer. No, I wouldn't go to the trade school that taught me how to be a basket weaver.
And I think
I can't hear you.
You're muted, but
I have to mute myself sometimes. It's my wife makes me. But you guys are right, though. The idea that, you got in California, you got community colleges for a fraction of what the state schools are. Kids can go there for 2 years and learn a lot.
My first 2 years in college was community college.
Here's the thing I find interesting is we talk about inflation right now and how things are going up. And if you look at the education system over the past 20 years, the amount of inflation that has gone into cost for college and the amount of income that we get for that specific degree isn't necessarily correlate.
Right.
And I think that that's a challenge. And also, we don't know our kids when they're 4 or 5 as much as, where they're going to be. Right. And so we put money into a 529, hoping they're going to go to college and hoping college will exist, maybe. Right. Whenever maybe they're going to be an entrepreneur. And then
bear in mind that college fund could be seed money for a business. I think of all these people that didn't go to college, they got a computer, and now they're multi-billionaires because they created some app.
And that's why I have mine as a adulting fund as opposed to a college fund that I'm setting up.
I like that term.
Because I don't know, and I want him to be a part. And the other thing, it's really interesting that a kid can rack up so much debt to go to college who doesn't even understand the money system, right? Or how to budget. And yet a business owner is like pulling teeth to get a loan when you're starting a business, right? And you're like, wait a second, isn't this backwards?
Hey, Brandon, can we get you back again? There's so much more I want to talk with you about. Can we set it up again and get you on sometime later?
I would love it. Yeah.
Be well, my friend. Talk to you soon. Thank you. Again, the name of his website will be at the end of the show. It's a grandmaswealthwisdom.com. You got to love that, right? What is the number one mistake that people make that causes them to be audited?
I wouldn't call it a mistake, and we could do a whole show on what causes people to be audited. The most common one is a computer program called DIF, D-I-F, Discriminant Income Function, where all of our tax returns go through a computer that looks at 66 different areas. Some are well known, some are secret. And then the computer scores the returns for what they call audit potential. And think of audit potential like a turkey with having Thanksgiving potential. And the bottom line is there are certain things that get more attention than others. The higher your income, the more likely you're to be audited just because of the income.
You can't help that, though.
Can't help that. And, although some deductions are more likely to get you audited than others, I've always, my whole career, said most people cheat on their taxes. They cheat themselves by not taking everything to which they're legally entitled. If you're legally entitled to something, you should take it. It's like most people listening to us today probably drive a car or a truck. At some point in your driving career, a police officer is going to pull you over and want to talk to you about something. Is your response to that, you will never drive a vehicle again the rest of your life because you don't want to have to talk to a cop? Or, okay, cop wants to talk to me, here's my driver's license, here's my registration, insurance. No, I've not been drinking, officer. Let's chat. and probably after a few minutes conversation, you'll drive away without a problem. So the bottom line is, if you're audited, so what? Just like if that cop stops you, so what? You haven't done anything wrong.
So keep your records and be honest about everything, and you'll do fine, right?
Take everything to which you're legally entitled.
Gotcha.
No more, no less, and you'll be fine.
Our next guest is, I'm really excited to talk to her. She is a CEO of a company called Stillwater Hemp. And they specialize in CBD, but white labeling and products and e-commerce. And she's nice enough to join us here. Melanie Kossan. Hello, Melanie. I got that name right, didn't I?
Yep, close enough. Hi, Chip. How are you? Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for being here. Let's go over and let's get into this real quick. What is CBD and what is not CBD? We've heard so much about that. Can you give us a little layman's explanation?
Yeah, CBD is one of many compounds that are in the hemp plant. The hemp plant, the 2018 Farm Bill defined two different kinds of cannabis plant. The cannabis plant that has high THC is called the non-hemp cannabis plant. And then the low THC, high cannabinoid plant is the hemp plant. And that's what we work with here. And we work with lots of different cannabinoids. And a lot of people are using it for a variation of things that are, they're getting better sleep, or maybe they're living a better lifestyle than they used to live when they had a lot of pain and inflammation.
We talk about this with some frequency because, as Steve, I know, will tell you, that this is not something that we believe should have this classification with the DEA.
Mostly the difficulty is with the confusion, by and large, between the THC and the CBD, and the fact that the CBD, the rest of the compounds besides the THC, have all been removed from the Schedule 1. And regulation is over with the USDA now, not the DEA, and at the federal level. So I think that's probably the largest difficulty I have.
Hey, Steve, let me ask you one of the questions about white labeling. I guess the question is this: is white labeling more or less relevant with the opportunities and range of social media now? In other words, when people can get exactly what they want and know what it is, do you tend to go to the source of that product? Or, because white labeling, you know what I think of when I'm white labeling? I play golf, and I can go to Costco and get golf balls that perform as well as Titleist Pro V1 for about a third of the price. All right. Why does a company like Titleist do something like that, Steve? They just have extra golf balls?
The answer is it depends. I will never forget when I was a beginning accountant and I worked for a giant CPA firm, and we had to go to the client's plant for inspection. And this big truck came in, unloaded some canned fruit. They put it on the forklifts, and they divided it into two areas. One got the fancy label on it, and the other one got the store label on it. It was physically, literally the exact same thing. It's all about marketing and maximizing profits. So the bottom line is, some people are very price conscious. That's all they care about is the price. They just won't buy surgery above a certain price. They just won't spend the money. Yeah. And okay, there's a market for that too. So the company says, okay, we can make some money on them and we can make more money. So the bottom line is, somebody somewhere determined that X% will buy at this price, Y% will buy at this price. And even though Y is a lesser profit, it's still a profit, increase our profit.
Melanie, I'm sorry, Steve. Is that the future of CBD in a way that my son was talking to me? He said, we're going to see major tobacco companies come in to the market with a lot of money, and they'll offer a product that is inferior, and you won't know that it comes from the tobacco companies and all. Is white labeling going to be a problem in your business?
I feel like white labeling, what we do is exactly what Steve was talking about. We are still have a healthy profit margin when we make the product to put somebody else's label on it. For us, it's a great way for people to get the product out to the public, and basically we are utilizing the benefit of our great product and our great lab results with the positive reputation and trust of the brand that we're putting on it. And it always is a win-win. I get plenty of profit. The other business gets plenty of profit. I do feel like with big tobacco, I think big tobacco is probably going to come in when the non-hemp cannabis, the marijuana, is fully legalized. They've already bought up a ton of property in California. They're already doing a lot of grows. And I think that's where probably the big tobacco.
And that was my prediction as well. Years ago, the tobacco companies were all set up to get in this business, just waiting for it to be legal. They were ready for a long time.
Yeah.
Is the government going to be ready for tax-wise, Steve? Because they tax it pretty heavily now. When the floodgates open, will the taxes go up or down?
Once again, it depends, and you have to see, are they doing something economically or have they gotten greedy? Because, for example, in California, where it's legal at the state level, a lot of places said, oh, they're going to put a special tax on this and a special license on that. And they basically drove the price up. So what's happened is that a lot of people still went to the illegal black market. Now, as an attorney, I'm always going to tell everybody comply with all laws, whatever they are, and that's that. But not everybody listens to that advice. Not everybody cares. So the bottom line is, I think we should have this like any other business. If you sell petunias, or you sell chocolate candy, or you sell groceries, or you sell anything else, all the rules should be the same. And one of the big problems with the cannabis business is that you have an Internal Revenue Code section that only allows for reduction of cost of goods sold and non-operating expenses, which leads into all types of torturous things where somebody says, well, okay, if I have a store and I sell pot, I can't deduct the rent, but if I have a store and I sell T-shirts, I can deduct the rent. So I'll sell both pot and T-shirts and I'll deduct part of the rent. And then you go fight with the IRS over, well, how much rent should be allocated to T-shirts and how much to pot? I think all that's ridiculous.
As a female entrepreneur, are there any advantages or disadvantages? I brought that up a few minutes ago, but I mean, I was raised by a single mom and 4 older sisters. And so, I know that women have spit and they have all of the acumen, and some of it's inherent, some of it's learned to be successful. What has your experience been?
I was very, very welcomed into my community as a business owner. I also am a single mom and my youngest son was raised with 2 older sisters. And I found that oftentimes there are marketing opportunities and other beneficial opportunities for women-owned businesses that simply aren't around for a male-owned business.
Steve, are there tax advantages for women and have their business?
It's not tax advantages, but there are certain counties that give preference to people in different categories, whether it be gender, race, or other things. And then again, when that happens, there are people that sue and say, well, that's unfair and you can't do it. There was a tax law, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, that preferential treatment was given to certain people, and somebody sued and the appeals court agreed with the people suing.
Yeah.
So again, so many questions that you ask a lawyer, the answer is it depends.
Well, Melanie, thank you so much for your time with us today. I really appreciate it. Will you come back on again with us?
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you now.
Thanks so much.
All right. Steve, you are so right. I mean, there's so many things that find their way at the footsteps of tax. And understanding that path and navigating that path is all the difference between success and failure in business, and in some ways life too, right?
Absolutely.
That is Steve Moskowitz, and I'm Chip Franklin, and that's another edition of Practical Tax. Stay with us, and we'll see you next time.
The Practical Tax Podcast with tax attorney Steve Moskowitz.